This is Python. This is the programming language that you want to learn. It is one of the most popular programming languages in the world, and for good reason. Companies like Google and Amazon and Netflix all use Python in one way or another. Now I know what you're thinking. Well, if all those gigantic companies use it, it must be super hard to type. It's got to have crazy math involved, and I'll never get to learn it. Actually, Python was built to be an introductory programming language. There's no semicolons or curly brackets or crazy syntax to remember. It's simple code. You'll also need a Replit account. So head over to repl.it and create an account. You just need an email address and a password you can remember. Once you've filled that out, hit New REPL in the top right-hand corner and, well, search for Python. You'll create a Python project and you can start typing an actual Python program that will run natively inside of Replit, and you can export all over the world. So let's get started right now. Let's write our first ever Python program, and we're going to start with the most famous exercise, the Hello World program. Now, this is famous. It's also a rite of passage. Whenever you're learning a new programming language, you almost always start with a Hello World program. What does this program do? Well, it makes the computer sentient. It wakes it up from sleep and makes it think and say things. It's going to show the words Hello World in the console. Let's go ahead and do this in Python. It's pretty simple. We write the word print in all lowercase. Then we put in the parentheses, an opening parenthesis and a closing parenthesis. If you've done any math, these are often used in advanced arithmetic. We have to have a matching set. Then we're going to put in some double quotes. Again, a matching set. We have an opening double quote and a closing double quote. Now between these double quotes, I've said that too many times, we can put anything we want. We can put in peanuts are better wet. We can put in anything we like. But because we are learning this for the first time, we're going to put in Hello World. Now that we have written this, we can run the program. What this run button does is it sends the code into the computer. The computer interprets our Python into something that it can run, and then it outputs something to the console. So let's hit run. Runs our program, and it worked exactly as we thought it would. Hello World shows on the console. Now, why did this work? Well, it worked because I followed the exact rules that Python put in place to run this code. And how do I know these rules? Well, I went to docs.python.org. This is the documentation written by the authors of Python to teach the programmer what the computer understands when you're writing Python. This is a set of rules. We often call this syntax in the coding community, but this is the official rule book for Python. And we can see here's the rule set or the syntax that we have to follow for print. It has to be all lowercase. We have to have a matching set of parentheses wrapped around whatever we want to print. And then it goes on for 4 paragraphs about what print can do. Don't worry if this is confusing right now. That's okay, you just started. But I did want to point out that all of the rules are in one spot, and that's docs.python.org. Let's go back to the code and let's see what else we can do with print. Well, we can print an empty line, and what did that do? Okay, so we've got Hello World and then this space, and then we exit the program and we can see that arrow. Okay, so that space must be the empty line. But let's find out for certain. Let's do another print and say, I am going to take over humanity. Totally safe thing for a computer to say. So we have Hello World, and then we have a space, and then it says, I am going to take over humanity. So we can see that we can pass in nothing, and it will just print an empty line for us, which is pretty cool. What we've also learned is that we can have as many of these print statements as we want, as long as each one is on its own line. If I put a print right here with the parentheses and run the code, we get a weird error. It doesn't run correctly. Well, that's because each Python statement must be on its own line. So every time we use a print, we have to write it on the next line. So we got rid of that thing here. Now we can hit run, and it works totally fine. We can also see that code runs from top to bottom. We would not expect print, just kidding, I am totally not a killer robot, to appear before hello world because it is written in the code afterwards. So when we run this, we fully expect just kidding, I am totally not a killer robot to be the last thing printed in the console because Python runs from top to bottom. There is one other thing that I want to note here. It's not crazy important for your code, but it is important when you're watching these videos and you're typing the code along with me. You can see that this print statement looks like it takes up 2 lines. But on the left-hand side of the second line, there's no number because it's not actually 2 lines. It's 1 line that has wrapped around. You don't have to match the numbers exactly to mine. You just have to make sure that the order in which I type the code is the same order that you type your code. And with this word wrapping, you can see that this is actually 1 line, not 2. If I actually scale this down, you can see that print is all on 1 line. But because it's too big to fit on a single line, it wraps it down and doesn't create a new line, but it just shows it on the line below. Just keep that in mind when you're following these tutorials. And you have written your first ever Python program. You've woken up your computer and turned it into a killer murder robot. Good job. We're going to expand on this in the next lesson, but first, let's get some practice. What I want you to build is a Python program that prints the name of your favorite superhero, your favorite movie, your favorite book, your favorite subject in school, something like that. Then it prints an empty line. And after that, it prints a description of why you love that thing above. If you can do that, then you're ready to move on to the next lesson. Go ahead and do that and share it with your teacher, post it to the showcase, make it go worldwide, make it viral, and then you're ready. Now, in that print video, I mentioned something about strings. But what is a string? Well, a string is just a string of letters. More specifically, a string is a data type in Python. Data types are just classifications that are assigned to values that Python will use. There's lots of different data types, but let's just focus on strings for the moment. Strings are, like I said, actual letters, characters, and words. Let's see an example. For instance, when I use that print command and I pass in some double quotes, whatever is inside of those double quotes is the string. These double quotes are what tells Python this is a string. Write these exact letters and spaces and store them as a string of characters strung together. So I can say something like hello, and then we know that the string in here is the word hello. I can even use words that are otherwise reserved by Python. Now, we know this print word is special to Python because it is related to a method, a special thing, a special command that Python will run. But if I put the word print in between double quotes, Python says, oh, this is the print string, not the print that I know. So I'm just going to show print out on the screen, and that's exactly what it does. Strings store names, letters, that kind of thing. Now, a little trick here is that even if you pass a number like 4 in as a string, it will be stored as a string, not a number. I could not add to this word 4. I could add to the number 4 without the double quotes, but the second that I put it in double quotes, it is no longer a number, it is a string. What's really cool is that in Python, strings have methods. Okay, ignore the word method, but you can manipulate strings kind of like you can manipulate numbers in math. We can add and subtract from numbers. We can take 4 plus 4 and it equals 8. We can do similar things to strings. Now, we can't add 4 to the word hi. That doesn't make any sense. But we can manipulate strings with their own methods. It's really, really cool, and we'll go over those as we use them. But for now, know that strings are just a sequence of letters and characters strung together and kind of glued in place. Let's talk variables. Now, you're not going to write any of this down that I write on the board, but when we go to the computer, there is going to be something for you guys to type. Now, what is a variable? Well, we might have seen variables before in math, like the letter X. You're solving an equation to find out what X is. X is the variable. It represents some value that you have to find. but we've actually used variables before. Variables are actually one of the very first things you ever speak as a baby. When you say mama or dada as a baby, you're actually using a variable because the word mom references your actual mom. That way, whenever you want to talk about your mom, you don't have to draw a picture of your mom or pull out a photo and say, I'm talking about this lady. When you use the variable mom, it represents your physical mom. But let's break it down into something that is a little bit more flat. A variable represents some data. So we can have a variable that is just a triangle. This triangle represents some value. That value is the word triangle. Cool. So every time that we want to write the word triangle, we can instead just draw a triangle. And every single time we draw a triangle, we know that this triangle represents this word triangle. Okay, cool. In programming, a variable is just a box that holds a reference to some data. So this box right here, called name, represents some data like Stephen. Every single time we want to use this name, Stephen, in our code, we can just write name, and we know that it refers to the word Stephen. And we can use this name all over our code, and it always means Stephen because we have set the value of name to be Stephen. This gets stored into here. Whatever is on the right-hand side of the equal sign is stored inside of the left-hand equal sign. Now, what's really cool is if we changed Stephen to be Matt, every place we used name now changes to Matt. We don't have to rewrite any of this code because name represents whatever is on the right-hand side. Really, really cool. Now let's see this in action. Let's take a deeper look at variables. Now, this code you're not going to type, but don't worry, we do have a cool project coming at the end. So variables hold reference to some data. So I can say something like name and set it equal to, I don't know, Jimmy Two Shoes. He's a mobster. He always wears two shoes. And then I can print out that name. Print takes not just strings, but actual variables, and it just prints out the value of that variable. The value of name right here is Jimmy Two Shoes. If I run this code, we can see it prints out name, Jimmy Two Shoes. And then I can change that string to be something else like John Jones and run it, and I don't have to change this line of code at all because I've changed the value of the variable, and so its representation also changes. One of the other really useful things about variables is they can track values as they change, track numbers as they change. So let's say I have some money here, and I start out with $100. Then if I just print this out, we can see that I have $100. Cool. Now let's say we buy something. So then I have money now equals what it was before minus, I don't know, $10. We bought, a can of Coke. And then we printed out money again. So now money should go from 100, it does the math, and then prints out 90. And I didn't have to, as the programmer, remember that it subtracted 10 from it and then print out 90 here. I just used the variable to track the value. This is going to seem a little confusing here because we have some math going on over here and it's being stored inside of this new variable, but that's okay. The big takeaway here is that variables can be used to track values as they change. Now, there are some rules that variables have to follow. We can't just say 12 in here as a variable. Variables can't start with numbers. Also, the only punctuation that we can use in a variable are underscores. Not dashes, because that's the minus sign in Python, but underscores. We also can't use exclamation points because that is reserved as the word not. We'll get into that later. So if we wanted to write like user's name, this
is not valid. This variable is not valid. And we can see that Python is already hinting at us that this is not correct because part of it is black and then part of it is a different color. We can't use apostrophes or single quotes in variable names, so we have to get rid of that. We also can't use spaces because what Python sees is that this is two distinct values, users and name. This space means that these are separate. So what we do in Python is to replace spaces, we do the underscore, user's name. This is a valid variable. We could also do something called camel case and just capitalize that N, but according to the PEP special guidelines, we should be using what's called snake case. And so there should be an underscore separating each word and everything should be lowercase. There are no rules that say you can't use uppercase, but it is proper Python coding that we use underscores and that everything is lowercase. There are also some reserved words that we can't use as variable names. Python will prompt you and say, hey, you can't do this. We can't use just the word none. We can't use just the word if as a variable name. These are keywords that Python has reserved for its own functionality. We can't assign these words a new value. They already have a value that Python is using. You don't need to memorize these. As you type them, Python will tell you that you can't do that. It'll throw a syntax error. It'll tell you, no, you can't touch this word. But it's good to know that there are some words you can't use. All right, let's actually write some code using print and using variable names. All right, before we actually write the code, there is one thing that I wanted to teach you about print because it's going to be important. Print takes in more than one value. That's right, we can pass in more than just hello here as a single string. We can actually, outside of the double quotes, put a comma and then put in another string in here. And we can run this and it will print out both hello and world separated by a space. This comma represents that there's more than one value that we want to pass into this print function. And then they're separated by a space. All right, now that we know that, let's write a report on a famous YouTuber. That's right, we're gonna write a report because my teacher's super cool. I have to create a report about a famous YouTuber. But I want my report to be used over and over and over again so that if next year my teacher asks me to write a report about a different YouTuber, I can just change a single line of code and my entire report works for that grade too. First, we need to create a variable that's going to store the name of our YouTuber because we know that this YouTuber name is going to be the thing that changes. And we want to represent it by a variable so we only have to change it once. I'm going to name my variable yt_name. Go ahead and follow along now. I want to see you type in this code. It doesn't have to be about YouTubers. It could be about something else, but I like YouTubers. And I'm going to set my yt_name variable to be equal to the value Mr. Beast. You can choose your own favorite YouTuber. I don't even actually like Mr. Beast. I know, blasphemy, I'm a heathen. But let's go ahead and do it about Mr. Beast for now. Then I'm going to go ahead and start off my report. I'm going to print out the string, the most popular YouTuber. And this report can be about the most popular YouTuber. We know that Mr. Beast is the most popular right now, but 6 years ago he wasn't. We would have written something else in here. So just know this is why we use variables so we can change it once. All right. What's the next line? I want to say the name of the most popular YouTuber. Right now, my code just says the most popular YouTuber, but I haven't told the user who that is. So let's do that now. Print the most popular YouTuber is, and then I use a comma to glue in, to pass in another value that I want it to print. And I want it to print the name of the most famous YouTuber. So I say YT name. Cool, this is looking good. So what do we expect to happen? Well, based on the print documentation, I expect it to print out these words, and then a space, and then whatever this variable represents, which happens to be Mr. Beast. So if we did this correctly, we should see the most popular YouTuber, then the most popular YouTuber is YT_name. Let's go ahead and run this. All right, that totally works, but I want this first print statement to kind of look like a title, like it's above my report. So I'm just gonna put in an empty print line. Now, how did I get an empty space between these two prints? Let's back up, let's break that down. All right, so what I did is I clicked at the end of line number 3. I clicked on the end of the line that I want to be at the top, and then I hit enter or return, and it created a new line for me. Now I can write some code on this new line. Let's run it. Looks great. Looks exactly the way that we're expecting. Let's print another fact about this YouTuber. So print. I don't really like this YouTuber because they are so popular. Everyone is talking about them. All right, so this is a little bit more complicated than what we've seen before, but let's go through it. We're now passing in 3 different values to print. We can pass in as many values as we want. So we have this string, then a space, then the variable value, then a space, which we're represented by commas, and then another string that is text that we're actually saying. So if we run this, we can see the most popular YouTuber. The most popular YouTuber is Mr. Beast. I don't really like Mr. Beast because they are so popular, everyone is talking about them. Awesome, it is working. And here is the magic. Let's make this about, that's right, I'm a shill. Let's plug Hackingtons' YouTube channel. Now, the most popular YouTuber is Hackingtons. I don't really like Hackingtons because they are so popular, everyone is talking about them. I changed this all over the place by just changing one value. That is really cool. Go ahead and show your teacher that you can use a variable to represent a string in your code. Make sure it is at least 2 places in your code, and then show them you know how to change it. Post it to the showcase, and then you can start the. You are doing amazing writing all of this code. We're starting to get some traction now. We have lots that we know, and now let's use it. I want you to, on your own, in a brand new project, open up a new Replit project, and I want you to print products on the screen. Each product will have its own print statement. You can do video games, you can do shoes, you can do Starbucks drinks, you can do whatever you want. And I want you to print the product and their price using a type of currency, whether it's dollars or Bitcoin or whatever that you want your currency type to be. That currency type needs to be able to change though. So if you're doing video games, Minecraft is going to cost $20. But it could also cost 20 doll hairs. It could also cost 20 used pieces of chewing gum. It could also cost 20. You get what we're doing here. We're changing the currency type. So you might want to set that currency type to be a variable so you can change it once. Make sure your currency type is set as a variable. Make sure you have at least 5 products with their prices, and then show your teacher that you can change that currency type by just changing that one variable. You're going to use all of the skills that we have learned so far, and you got this. I'm confident that you can build this project and post it to the showcase. Good luck, have fun. Let's talk about input. Input is how the user sends information into the computer. When you type using a keyboard on a computer, you're sending input from the keyboard into the computer. When you use a mouse and you click a button on your mouse, you're using an input system. You're sending an input, a click, into the computer. So in Python, we can use input, the function, to actually get an answer to a question from the user. Let's see an example of that. So in Python, there is a function, a method, a fancy thing, just like print, that allows us to get some input from the user. And because it's Python, it's just named input. Just like Python, we have the parentheses that we're going to add to it. That's what makes it a function, that gives it some fanciness. But the important thing about input is it's different than print in that it's going to store something into a variable after the input is called. So in input, in the parentheses, we ask a question just like we were going to do a print statement. So we're going to put some double quotes in there, just like the print statement. And we know that anything in these double quotes can be anything we want because this is just a string. We can change this to be anything. Just for a quick example, let's ask the user's name. What is your name? Question mark. And then for me personally, I always like to put an extra space right at the end of my question so that when we actually run this code like this, the cursor where the user is going to type is spaced away from the question. But that's just a personal thing. It's completely up to you. So what is your name? And I can say Steven, hit return, and then that's it. Input in this case is not actually being used to its full potential. The coolest thing about input is that whatever the user types in gets stored in a variable. So check this out. If we go back to input, I'm going to click before the I in input and assign this to a variable. So name equals. Name equals the input from the user that's answering this question. So name is not storing this function. Name is storing the answer to this question. So now if I hit run and I say something like Steven, which is my name, now we can print name and we get Steven because name, this variable, is storing the returned value. That's really fancy. We'll learn about that later. But it's storing the returned value from executing this code. That returned value is the input the user typed in. Now, let's build something together. Let's build a Mad Lib. It's just going to be using input, variables, and print. All stuff that we've learned before, but it's going to be a pretty cool use case of how you might use input. So first, let's go ahead and print out. We should write a crazy story. Just an intro to the user, right? We run this and it just prints out that text. We know that. Let's go ahead and print an empty line. And then let's print another set of directions. Okay, nothing crazy there. Again, we're just introducing the project. I'm going to go ahead and put another empty line. Now, we're going to need 3 pieces of information from the user. How do we get information from the user? We get information by using input, and then we store that information in a variable so we can use it later. So I'm going to create a game variable, and this is going to store the input, which is the answer to what is your favorite video game. Okay, you could change this to be anything you want. This could be a board game. You could change this variable name to be anything you want and then ask a question that's related to that variable name. So I'm asking about their favorite video game, so I'm going to name my variable game. All right, so if we run this, we can see this code in action. It's going to wait for the user's input, and then we can store that input in the variable game. Perfect, it works. Now I'm going to get 2 more pieces of information. I'm going to get an adjective or a descriptive word and a place. All right, so I have these 3 pieces of data that I've gathered from the user. Now, in a Mad Lib, we put that information into a story, and the user can make it as silly or as serious as they want based on their answers here. So we know from past projects that we can actually print multiple strings, and each one of these things in input, each one of these variables is stored as a string. So even if the user enters in a number like 6, input doesn't store the number as a number. Input stores whatever the user typed in as a string. Since we know print can print out multiple strings, we can link them together with commas in the order in which we want them to be printed. We can say a string here, oh my goodness, Teacher Michael just beat, and then we can also have it print out game. Now we know with the print function that each thing separated by a comma gets separated in the actual console by a space. So we don't need to put an extra space here or anything like that. Then after we say game, I'm going to glue on the next sentence, which is going to be with only his feet. Too bad they smell like, and then I want to glue on another question, another string that we got, that adjective. It's a descriptive word, and it's going to be ADJ. We're just putting the name of the variable. Now we glue on that last sentence. Glue on the place that the user entered in. And that last string. So remember, print can print out more than one string. You link each string together with a comma. Strings don't have to be just strings. They can be variables that represent strings as well. Now, if we run our code here, it introduces the story. Then it takes some input. Let's say Valorant. I'm going to spell that wrong. Breath smell like toenail clippings. And what is your favorite place to go on vacation? Let's go the moon. And then it prints out the story, gluing in all of the answers to our questions. Oh my goodness, Teacher Michael just beat Valorant. Well, Valorant is a variable. We can see it's just using Valorant. So the next time I run this, whatever input I put in there will swap out here. With just his feet, too bad they smell like toenail clippings. Again, a variable that we glued in. That variable is assigned in input, which is really cool. And they should really go to the moon to get us some nose plugs. This is awesome. I really like this project because you can get creative with it. If you wanted to make this story longer, ask more questions, feel free to do so. Or if you're happy with what you have, go ahead and submit it. And then you're going to build something on your own. It's your turn to build something using input. It's going to be very similar to what we did together, but I want you to build it 100% on your own. Create a new Replit project and build Ditto controls the computer. All I want you to do is ask the user a question about something about themselves, like, what is your favorite video game? And then Ditto, who's annoying and copies everything that you do, says, oh, my favorite video game is also, and then the name of the video game. So ask 5 different questions and have Ditto repeat the user's answer back to them. Let's build a big project together that uses everything that we have learned so far. This is the capstone project for this belt, and then you'll have a capstone independent practice right after this. So let's see what we want to build. Well, you can see right here, I want to build a joke machine, something that tells me a joke. So let's run this program and see what is going to be happening in this. Welcome to the joke machine. Enter an answer and get a joke. Okay, so I can see this line right here is just a print statement. I'm just printing something to the console. And then the next line, I'm asking for some input from the user. So I could enter an answer like gorilla. You chose gorilla. Okay, so I see that I'm saving this input into a variable because I'm repeating that variable's value down here in this print. That's a terrible idea. Those are not funny at all. Let's use cow instead. What do you call a cow with no legs? All right, so we've got a print statement here that has a variable inside of it. So we're going to do some commas in that print statement. What do you call a cow with no legs? That looks like it's adding some input. So I can say hairy. Nope, not a hairy. Okay, so again, we're storing that variable input into we're storing the input from the user inside of a variable, and then I'm using it again in a print statement, and then I jump to the next like joke, a body part, something like that. So we kind of see where we're going here. Let's start from scratch and let's build this joke machine together. I'm in Replit. I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. It's going to be a Python project, and I'm going to call this joke machine. And then I'm going to add film onto mine because I'm actually filming this. And then I'm going to create my REPL. Excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the files. We're not going to need those. And then I'm going to make the console a little bit smaller so that you can see more of what I'm typing. These are also changes that you can make to your Replit interface to get it to feel more like where you want to code. There's also some things like dark mode that you can apply. I don't use dark mode when I film these videos so that you can see my mouse, but stuff like that you can change. So first, I want to scaffold my project. I want to put in some comments so that I know what I'm going to do. Comments in Python are code that the computer does not run. This is simply for the user or the programmer to view. And we create a comment by putting a hash in front. A hash is a character that Python recognizes as a, I'm not looking, I don't see this code. And the first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and greet the user. Then after that, we're going to store an animal input as a variable. Cool. And then we're going to print some sort of like a, that's a terrible choice. Here's what we're actually going to do. Print their answer and change their mind. Something like that. After that, we're going to go ahead and ask them another question. Ask them a question in the form of like a joke, you know, like knock, knock, who's there, that kind of thing. And then we go ahead and the joke. Okay, so that's going to be the scaffolding for our project for one single joke. We're going to have multiple jokes, but for at least one, we're good here. Okay, so let's go ahead and greet the user. Well, we just want to say something to the user, so we're just going to use print. All right, so we're just saying something to the user, so we said print. Now again, anything between these double quotes can be anything you want. You can also start by printing just a bunch of lines or start your joke machine any way you want. Now I'm going to, because I know I'm going to need it, is I'm going to put an empty print statement to separate the greeting from the actual input. But now I want to store an animal input as a variable. So I'm going to store something as a variable, or just in general, I want to store something. So I'm going to use a variable. I'm going to use the variable animal because I'm storing input about an animal. So I'll call my variable animal. And that's going to be assigned to the answer to this input. Name an animal. All right, so we've went ahead and written this. Let's run it. Let's make sure we don't have any errors. Welcome to the joke machine. Enter an animal. We can write chicken in here, and we're good. That all works the way that we want. Now we want to print their answer out to the screen and change their mind. We can do that all in one statement by saying something like print you chose, and then separate the variable that we put in there with commas. All right, so I've done that. I have a string. Then I have a variable. This happens to be a string, separated by comma, so it's all glued together, and then another string. So we print this, we should be good. So we put chicken back in here, and we can see that it does, in fact, go inside of here. Now, one of the mistakes that you might make is by forgetting a comma. If we run this, we can see that it instantly spits out an error. So it says invalid syntax because we forgot that comma. So syntax are all of the punctuation that happens. And so if we're missing some syntax, we're missing a comma, it will tell us that on line 7, there's something missing. So we went to line 7 and we put that back in there. What might also happen is you might misspell animal. When we run that, it still runs because all of the code up until this part, when we hit line 5 and we ask for input, the program actually waits to execute the rest of the code until that input is put in. So if we say something like chicken in here, now we get the error. Name Nimble is not defined. Okay, so name error, name Nimble is not defined. If something is not defined, it's most likely a spelling error. And we can say, oh yeah, Nimble, yeah, I don't have anything called Nimble. I have something called animal. So I put the A back in there and we're good to go. All right, let's do the next one. Now we're going to ask them a question. This question is the actual joke. So I'm going to call this variable joke1. And I'm going to say input What do you call a cow with no legs? Huh? What do you call a cow with no legs? Then they can say something. So we say chicken. Nope. Okay. We call them Larry. All right. So we've stored their answer so we can kind of spit it back to them like you're incorrect. So I'm going to say print. Nope. Not. And then glue in the answer they put in because, again, they got it wrong. Now, if they got it correct and we say they got it wrong, it's even funnier. So you're good there. And then we say the actual punchline to the joke. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and also add in an empty line so that when I ask my next joke, tell my next joke, there's some space. So there's, gaps between each joke. Let's run it. Let's see if this works. All right, welcome. Name an animal, chicken. You chose chicken. That's a terrible idea. What do you call a cow with no legs? We'll go with Larry. Nope, not Larry. You call it ground beef. Ha, 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 ha. All right, so a little bit of cleanup here, and we are good. We have a single joke. Now, what I want to do is I want to ask 2 more jokes. So the best way for you at the moment to do this is just to go down here to the next line and kind of retype this code. You don't need the greeting again, but you do need this chunk right here. Lines 5 through 12 are going to be what you use to tell the next joke. Now, you can't use the word animal again because that variable name has already been used. My next joke is going to be about a body part. So I'm going to call my next variable body part, and then I'll set it equal to some input. Name a body part. All right, so now I have the beginning of my next joke. After that, well, we can see what steps we took before. All right, so we say what they chose and then tell them why that's wrong or gross or something like that, and then actually tell them what the joke's going to be about. All right, so since this doesn't need a new variable or anything, let me actually just copy this. So to copy this, what I'm going to do is click at the end of the line. I'm going to hold down left click and drag my mouse until everything that I want to copy is blue. Once I have that, I'm going to use Control C or Command C to copy. I can also right click here and copy. Then I'm going to go to the line underneath body part. To get a new line, I'm going to hit Enter at the end of the previous line, and then I'm going to paste in my code. I can right click and choose paste, or I can hit Control V or Command V, and that will paste in my code. Now, I don't want them to say animal. I want it to say body part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click that variable, and I'm going to change it to the one that we're actually having the joke about, body part. And I can keep the same greeting. I can keep that same, that's a terrible idea, those are not funny at all, or I can change this and make this response back to the user a little more tailored to what body part they're talking about, or just a body part in general. So what I'm going to do is going to say, that's gross. Let's tell a joke about eyes instead. All right, so I have this greeting, so I've gone ahead and done this step and this step. Now I need to actually tell them the joke. Most jokes start with a question, so that's going to be some input. So I'm going to go ahead and do another input, but this is going to be for joke 2. And that's going to be input. And now I tell a joke. What did one eye say to the other? All right, so that's going to ask for some input, and then I go ahead and print out the punchline for the joke and their dumb response, whatever it happens to be, just like we did here. And then the punchline. But they actually said, between us, something smells, because between your 2 eyes, something smells, your nose smells things. I'll see myself out, and then to separate this joke from the next one, I'll print. Let's see our program run all together. We can name an animal. Let's go with chicken. You chose chicken. That's a terrible idea. Those are not funny at all. let's use a cow instead. What do you call a cow with no legs? Let's go with Matt. Nope, not Matt. You call it ground beef. Name a body part. Let's go with head. You chose head. That's gross. Let's tell a joke about eyes instead. What did one eye say to the other? Hello, maybe? Sure, hello is funny, I guess. But they actually said, between us, something smells. All right, we have a joke machine. Our program tells the user jokes, but we only have 2 jokes. Let's add a third joke. And because we've written this code before and we know what things we're going to need to change, we can just copy and paste. So I'm going to copy this chunk of code here. I'm going to go down below and paste it in. Now we know we can't use the same variables again, right? We can't use body part again. And I personally know that this joke is going to be about a subject in school. So I'm going to change this to subject. And then the question shouldn't be name a body part. It should be name a subject in school. And then you chose subject. And then we can customize the saying, like not my favorite. Let's tell a joke about, and then this one is going to be a math joke. I am paid by the math companies to tell math jokes. All teachers are paid by math companies to tell math jokes. Just kidding, that's not a real thing. And then this isn't joke 2, this is our third joke. So let's change this variable to be joke 3. And then we're going to change this one down here to also be joke 3. Once I change a variable, I'm going to change it every place it's used. Now we say tell the joke. What are 10 things you can always count on? And then because they're saying that they have 10 of these things, we can say you have 10 blank, no way, that kind of thing. And then we actually tell the punchline of the joke. The answer is actually fingers. You can always count on your fingers, and you have 10 of them. Yay, bad math jokes. But we have a third joke here. We can run our program, and we can see there's no errors. And everything runs just the way we wanted it to. You can expand on this more if you want. You can add in more jokes if you want. But now you have the structure of how to build a joke machine. And the coolest part is that we started with comments. We started by scaffolding our application before we typed any code. We structured our thoughts before we just dove in and built the project. Congratulations, you've written a lot of Python code. Next, you're going to build something on your own, which is very similar to this project here. For the capstone independent practice for the white belt, I want you to build a riddle machine. Notice how the joke machine was made. You ask them for a body part or a subject or something like that. You print out their answer, and then you tell them the actual joke and the punchline. The riddle machine is going to be very, very similar. What you're going to need to do is ask them a question. A good riddle is always a question. In a round room, where's the corner? Or how many corners does a round room have? Or if a rooster lays an egg at the very tip of a house, which way will the egg roll? Something like that. It's a question, just like we did for the joke. Joke 1, joke 2, joke 3, those were all inputs asking a question. Then the user types in an answer. You store that answer in a variable, and you repeat that answer back to them in the print statement where you actually tell the answer to the riddle. Oh, that's very clever. You answered, and then repeat their answer. The answer is actually roosters don't lay eggs. Something like that. Tell me 3 riddles, post it to the showcase, and you can be leveled up. You're a Python programmer now. You got this.